What a little bitch.
What does it take for someone to become a villain? Is that cunning, calculated mentality something you're born with, or is it a result of facing hardships so far beyond your imagination that you're forced to adapt for your survival? Or is it something even beyond that? The Penguin is a beautiful tug of war for power between our two main characters, Oz and Sofia. Whilst they're both portrayed as villains, what's fascinating is how they're both so different, how their origins were different, how that affected their actions, and ultimately even who won in the end. But first, what does it even mean to be a villain? The image of a villain in my mind is someone ruthless, someone who doesn't care for the sacrifices along the way to their goals. That generally unempathetic demeanor that lets them lie and deceive everyone is what is at their core. Someone with no value for the human life around them, who is truly selfish and self-serving. Combined with all of this, someone who's sharp and intelligent, never letting an opportunity pass them by. That's how I see a villain. I don't think that's all there is though. All those qualities, ruthlessness, ambition, and deception could just as easily describe an entrepreneur. So what specifically makes a villain different? What makes them truly terrifying? I think it's their motivations. It's why they lie, why they manipulate, why they cross lines others wouldn't dare to. The more driven a villain is, the more unshakable their twisted worldview becomes. There is no guilt, no hesitation, only the belief that what they're doing is necessary, justified, and even righteous. A villain will use and abuse everything around them to serve their purpose, and they will never feel an ounce of regret.
So you're saying that he's the liar?
Yes!
Not you.
Yes! Fucking yes!
Okay.
No,
Sofia is a villain. From the very moment we're shown Sofia, we know she's a problem. She's bold, assertive, and inquisitive. It especially doesn't help that she has a chip on her shoulder to find out who murdered her brother. A calculating, cold-blooded, and vengeful antagonist. That's who Sofia was to us for the first few episodes. Combining this with her dubious nickname, the Hangman, the show sold us on an idea that she was a bitter and crazy psychopath. This also suited us as the audience. Given that we follow Oz and his actions through the show, Sofia is someone who stood in his way. It's convenient to treat her as the antagonist while rooting for Oz. Episode 4 shifts this narrative on its head. Suddenly, Sofia is just a normal woman. She's smart, bright, and hopeful. She isn't a crazy bitch, she's someone who without a single doubt got robbed of a normal and happy life. She got tortured at the Arkham Asylum, got betrayed at every moment, and despite how hard she tried to stay hopeful, in the end she couldn't keep her sanity and gave in to the abuse. She was turned into who she is today. She may still be the antagonist of the Penguin, but she was turned into a villain. This matters a lot, because I'd like to argue that Sofia as a villain was also so normal. All her motivations could easily be traced to human emotions. All her actions had a good enough solid purpose behind them, and yeah, I get she's a little off the deep end, but she's more normal as a villain than she appears. Before I get my words twisted, let me just say Sofia is still a criminal. She commits crimes. She should be in a whole lot of trouble for her actions. What I am arguing though is that she's not a crazy psychopath. She's a normal human. To show this though, I'd like to outline Sofia's motivations. She wants revenge for being sent to Arkham wrongfully, and she wants to avenge her brother's death. These motivations are sensible. I mean, her whole life got ruined by getting sent to Arkham. She had to suffer for 10 years for a crime she didn't even commit. Wanting the people who convicted her to suffer isn't all that crazy. That's a fairly human motivation. For the second one, her brother Alberto was her beacon of hope. It's the only reason she could hold onto hope in the Arkham Asylum. Alberto visited Sofia every week to reassure her, to make sure that she was doing fine. Sofia was hoping to meet Alberto after she left Arkham. Finding him dead and wanting revenge for his death is also just so human. I'd like to argue even further. Her actions are also coherent. She doesn't kill people without a good purpose. In episode 1, she shoots this guy because she wants to get to the bottom of her brother's murder. Let's have a look at this scene in episode 6. Sofia goes to Eve's house and threatens to kill her to find Oz. And yet, when she doesn't get what she wants, she doesn't just kill Eve for the sake of it. She doesn't engage in deception very often. I mean, the only time she was even complicit in lying to someone in the show was when she was forced into it by Oz himself. She's straightforward with her motivations, and her qualities as a leader and opportunist push her towards her success. Sofia is still absolutely a criminal, but I believe that she's someone who got dealt an incredibly unfortunate hand in her life. She's someone that's still redeemable even at the end of the show. If we ran down the villain checklist, we could probably agree that Sofia can be cold-hearted, cruel, selfish, and even outright brutal. She may yet be classified as a villain while she's out to get her vengeance. What about without these motivations on the table though? Would she still be a villain? I'm not so sure. I believe that if she had escaped the game and gone to Italy, she would never kill another soul and live out her days peacefully. She should still be held accountable for her crimes in Gotham and all, but she would very easily stop being a villain. That's the kind of villain Sofia was. Vengeful, angry, but also human. The real villain all along was Oz.
I mean, that's the thing about family. Oz, it's your strength. Oz, when it drives you. Fuck if it don't make you weak, too.
This man is a villain. Before I dive into Oz and his character, I just want to take a moment to appreciate how the show plays with the audience. Oz being the protagonist of the show is almost such beautiful misdirection because this man is a problem. Every time Oz gets a win, the show celebrates it. I don't think I speak for myself when I say that when we saw Oz's plan to fool Sofia work in episode 1, it felt good. It felt good when he framed Castillo for his crimes. It felt good when he got the lights back at Crown Point. Oz felt like a badass every time he got a win because, I mean, isn't he the underdog? The odds are stacked against him in this game and he's using whatever means he can to get an advantage. That is at least a little bit inspiring. Yet, every time we see Oz committing heinous crimes on screen, killing people for the sake of it, lying and deceiving as naturally as he breathes, the show asks us, is this really who we're rooting for? Yes, Oz is the protagonist of The Penguin, but is he a good person? After Sofia is defeated at the end of the show, we finally think that Oz has a reason to change for the better. I mean, he won the battle, he won the game, Gotham is his as he always wanted. Surely now there's no good reason to lie or deceive or kill. Yet, he kills Victor and proves to us that he was always just an absolute villain. Oz was born a villain. I don't think I need to highlight Oz's crimes to prove the statement to you, right? I mean, he lies to everyone he can to get whatever advantage he can, he kills people on a whim, he generally doesn't care for anyone but himself. Even Oz killing his brothers is so interesting because ultimately that's also just a purely selfish action. Oz wanted his mother for himself. There was no remorse for their deaths, no second thoughts. He got an opportunity and he simply did what he needed to do in that moment. That's who Oz is. A lying, opportunistic psychopath who's simply so selfish he would use whatever he can to get whatever he wants. It's even more blatant how problematic Oz is in the context of Sofia. Oz never hesitated to lie. He almost lied to everyone he ever met in this story, including his own mother. Oz and Sofia both killed people, but Oz's kills were always either selfish or without a good enough reason. Like when he killed Alberto, for example. In episode 6, the scene where Sofia visits Eve, if this was someone like Oz in Sofia's place, Eve would have never left this encounter alive. I said earlier that if Sofia had escaped the game and gone to Italy, she would stop being a villain and never kill anyone ever again. But what about Oz? The game was over at the end of the series and yet he killed Victor because Victor would become a liability to him. Oz was that much more sinister. His motivations that much more selfish, his view of the world that much more twisted, and his hunger for power and respect that much more unsatiated. That's the kind of problem he was, a truly despicable human being. This might sound a little silly, but the show ending is what it took for me to think about Oz more objectively. The more I thought about both him and Sofia as well as everyone else in the show, the more normal and grounded everyone else looks and the more unhinged and crazy Oz is. Which brings me to my hypothesis of the show. This is what it took to win the battle. Oswald Cobb, the Penguin, is the exact kind of person it takes to succeed in this story. In this war, the blend of perfectly unhinged, selfish, and cunning is what is needed to overcome the troubles along the way and overcome monsters like Sofia. The corruption of a city like Gotham affects everyone. Seemingly normal people act like monsters to achieve their goals, but ultimately, it's the real scoundrels that a city like this rewards. That's the reason Oz won in the end, because unlike most of the other people in the story, he was born a real monster.
I got the devil in my house, Rex. What the hell am I supposed to do?
So then, let's recap. What exactly is a villain? It's clear from our exploration of Oz and Sofia that villains come in different shapes and sizes. At the very least, I think we can say that there are two different kinds of villains, ones that are made and ones that are just born that way. I feel like that's not enough though. I think if our definition of what makes a villain is consistent, the people that get turned into a villain by circumstance, like Sofia or the others in the story, only ever embody a small portion of what it really takes. Without these circumstances, they would simply just be normal people, and if rehabilitated or removed from their shitty environments, they would simply live normal lives. Them becoming villains is a maladaptive mechanism of their circumstance. This isn't just about Sofia either. I think everyone in this story would be relatively normal if Gotham wasn't a city in the middle of a gang war. They would all be able to live happily and peacefully. So maybe that's the point of the Penguin. A plea to better the world around us. Better support structures for rehabilitation, better judicial practices so victims like Sofia don't have to suffer, and better cities and infrastructure so terrible environments don't lead people down the wrong path. That way, a majority of the people in Gotham could live normally. They could live peacefully and won't have to become monsters just for their own survival. That covers a large majority of the problems in this story. But then what about people like Oz? I mean, Sofia and the like sure seem redeemable and can be helped to fit into society, but Oz? That man is so far above the list compared to anyone else that if he isn't locked up behind bars in complete isolation, I don't think this tiny little world could ever know peace. Oz is utterly irredeemable because he was simply just born a monster. Or was he? You know, the story got me thinking, when exactly did Oz become irredeemable? Was it when he killed Victor? I mean, surely not, he was maniacal enough just fine before that. Was it when he killed his brothers? Sure, that could be a theory, but what normal kid does what Oz did there? Was it when he was born? This one is by far the most interesting of them all to me. Oz was born different. For the sake of discussion, let's say that different means that Oz was born with the brain of a psychopath. Although psychopathy isn't formally recognized as a mental illness by most medical standards, we know from research that psychopaths have structurally and functionally different brains, particularly in the areas linked to empathy, emotional regulation, and impulse control. These abnormalities can then lead to antisocial and dangerous behaviors, making it more likely for them to become criminals. So then, was Oz doomed to be a monster the moment he was born? Actually, I don't think it's that straightforward. Even despite his fundamentally different brain, there is a little more nuance to consider here. There are studies on psychopathy that I looked into to find the truth. I wish I could say this research made me an expert on the topic. It didn't. What it did give me is an angle though, something I believe adds a layer of depth to the whole debate. Being born with the brain of a psychopath is not the death sentence it sounds like. People born with the brain of a psychopath have been shown to grow up just fine into normal functioning members of society. In the book by James Fallon titled The Psychopath Inside, the author describes living his life with the brain of a psychopath. Living just as a normal person, growing up happily, and even with the chance that he may have never found out about his conditions if he wasn't deeply involved in the field himself. So then, what was the difference? It was the upbringing. The author of the book grew up in a loving family, with friends around him, and lived a normal, healthy life. Someone like Oswald is distinctly different. Oswald grew up in poverty, in an area run by gangs. There is good evidence in the field of criminology called the social control theory that states that people that grow up in social groups that encourage them not to break the law have a much lower likelihood of growing up and becoming criminals. Given that Oz was surrounded by gangs, the likelihood of him becoming a criminal is also just that much higher. Oz was also raised by a single mother. There are these studies that outline the impact of not having parental warmth while growing up, which state that people missing paternal figures while growing up are more likely to develop into their psychopathic traits. Even apart from that though, the book from James Fallon highlights that nature and environment plays a huge role in the development of antisocial and delinquent behaviors in children, and it's a huge component of what makes a psychopath. It's not just the genetic makeup, it's both the genetic makeup and their growing up. Oswald is a product of his influences. He grew up admiring gangsters like Rex. As he grew older, he longed for that real respect and influence, and he was never really taught that things like that were wrong by the people around him. Even after killing his brothers, there was no real course correction done on his behavior, and ultimately, he was allowed to become a real problem as a result of all these factors. In the scene in episode 8, Frances is given two options: kill Oz or nurture him into someone useful. What if she had a third option here? What if there was more that could be done for a young delinquent like Oz? Surely, with all we know now, there was enough chance for redemption. It's because of his circumstances that this was never an option for someone like Oz. That is the ultimate point of The Penguin. Oswald was also made into a villain. It's a very different kind of made than Sofia's case, but it is made nonetheless. Had Oswald been born into better circumstances, he may never have turned into a villain at all. Villains are made. Yes, there is enough to be said about how Oz being a psychopath made him much more deadly as a villain, but I believe the story is a critique of the world, a critique of a lack of support structures, a critique of the way modern society is structured. There may be no saving Oswald Cobb from the Penguin now that he's so far gone, but there are plenty of ways to save people similar to him in the real world. In the end, this is what I believe we should all strive to achieve. I do want to say that this is my interpretation of the show and its messages. It may well be the case that the curtains were just simply blue and there isn't much more to it than Oz being born a messed up psychopath, but that isn't something I wanted to take out of this story. The Penguin was such a fantastic experience from start to finish for a variety of reasons, and I hope for some of you my interpretation added a little bit more to think about in terms of its quality. As usual though, that's all for me. Thank you all for watching.